So using HTML geolocation, okay. So you go to any browser, in the console, you have access to this navigator, okay. This navigator is an object with lots of methods and members, basically lots of members in it, properties and methods. This navigator has another object as one of its property called geolocation. So navigator object, we have access to navigator object globally, and navigator has another object as its member called geolocation. This navigator dot geolocation object has this amazing method called get current position. So if you see get current position, it is a function, a method, okay, attached to the geolocation object. So navigator object has geolocation object has get current position method. Let's see what happens when we invoke the get current position, because it requires one argument, and that argument is a callback function, okay. So that is whenever, so this is an asynchronous operation, okay. This is an asynchronous method, and the way to get value of this is to pass a callback function. So basically this function will be executed once the browser or the JavaScript engine is able to get the current position, okay. And so we will get access to position, and we can easily log it out here, console.log position. Again, position has a member called coords, which has another property called latitude, okay. Or maybe let's just log out pos, okay. So once it is able to retrieve the coordinates, you can see that after a couple of milliseconds we get back this object position, and inside position we have chords. Inside chords we have latitude and longitude. Very important, okay. Let's do the same thing in browser. So now you have the broader perspective. You know that we have navigator, we have geolocation, we have get current position. Let's use this inside a browser. So here we have just added a button here, okay. And on click of that button, we are actually, let me type it out, okay, then it will be clearer to you. So whenever the click event happens in the button, this function will be executed, right? So the API of get current position is very similar. So navigator dot geolocation dot get current position. So just like button dot add event listener, navigator dot geolocation dot get current position, whenever the current location will be found, because that's an asynchronous operation, this function will be executed, the first function that we pass in, okay. And whenever an error happens, this second argument, the second callback function that we pass, that will be executed. Okay, so here we'll be getting some data. We can name it anything. We can name it data, we can name it position, whatever. And here it will be error. Okay, I'll just name it pause and error. Okay, so now whenever the browser will be able to fetch the current position, this function will execute, and inside that we will have access to position. This is how callbacks work. And whenever an error will happen, we will have the access to error. Okay, now inside this we can save several values. For example, we can create a variable called latitude, and it's going to be equal to position dot coords dot latitude. Let longitude is equal to position dot coords dot longitude. Then we can console log latitude and longitude. Okay, let's see where this amount of code takes us. Okay, we will see all of these in just a bit. Okay, I'll just comment this out. And now if I go here, I refresh the page, and now when I click get geolocation, after a few milliseconds I'll get my latitude and longitude. Right? Amazing. Now suppose we disable the permissions. Okay, so we won't allow localhost to get access to our location. Okay, so we have revoked the permissions. Now what will happen when we click it? We won't see anything happening, right? We won't see absolutely anything happening. That time we should be able to see some errors, right? So to be able to see error, you can simply console log the error. Okay, so if I console log error and then click it, then you can see that we have a code and a message. Okay, so now there are two ways to show proper message to the user. One is we can simply show error dot message, which is a great way to do that. Okay, now if I click geolocation, I'll see proper error. Okay, and in case the permission is given, then I'll be able to see the longitude and latitude. Cool. So this looks like a much robust solution. In the W3 Schools example, they have used this switch case. Okay, so they go through each error.code, and then show a custom error message. So this is also good. You may try this out as well. Another thing that is shown in the W3 Schools example is position dot whatever this result object is. We have this navigator.geolocation.watch position. Okay, so what watch position does, it has a similar callback API, and it gives posting the current longitude and latitude. So yeah, that is another thing. So but I have seen in 99% of the times that you will be asked in an interview, or you'll be using in a project you'll be asked to console log or alert the current longitude and the current latitude of the web page, okay, of the browser. So, and this can, you already know, easily be done using navigator, geolocation, get current position, and just remember that it's a callback API. So here you pass in a function. Inside the first function, you get back that value as soon as it is retrieved. Okay, So this is one thing. Next, drag and drop. Again, for drag and drop feature, I think rather than, I'll walk you through this code later, but first let me code out something for you. So I'll get rid of all of this code here, and I'll get off this here, and here I'll create maybe 5 divs with the class of empty, total 5 divs. Okay, and let me also put them inside a container. Okay, so div dot draggable wrapper maybe, and here I have all of these, and inside one of them I will put in another div which is going to be the draggable div. Okay, so it's going to be draggable, and its class is going to be fill. Okay, let me save it. Now let me give it some nice CSS. Okay, so we have draggable wrapper, empty, and fill. Okay, so first thing I'll do is I will do something with this draggable wrapper. Simple, really simple. Okay, minimal thing. So we have this draggable wrapper. I'll give it a display of flex. Okay, nothing else. And also I'll give a background color of maybe Azure. Okay, so this is one thing. Next, for these divs, so they are empty. I'll give them a height of 100 pixels, a width of 100 pixels. I'll give it a nice padding of maybe 4 pixels. Let's see how it looks. So here they are, and I'll give them each empty maybe a background of maybe something like this cornflower blue, and we will also give them a gap of maybe 8 pixels. Okay, so here we have our draggable regions. Awesome, it's already looking quite good. And for this fill thing, okay, so for this fill thing I will give it a background color of gold, and I'll maybe give it a height of maybe, let's see what we have this way. We don't really see it, so height of maybe 80 pixels and width of maybe 80 pixels. Okay, so here we have. Now we would like this to be centered so it looks a little bit nicer. So at the empty level we'll maybe do a display of flex. and align items, center, justify content, center, and here we go. So now the first thing that we would like to do is to make this yellow draggable, right? And we can see that it's already draggable because we gave it an attribute of draggable and we were able to set it to true. So it's already draggable, as we can see. Alright, so usually what happens is when we click and drag something, we get a visual clue that we are dragging it from somewhere. And when we hover over something, then we know that, we have selected a particular cell to drop it, right? So let me, add CSS, and once we proceed with the example, things will make a little bit more sense to you. So here, I'll create a class called hold, and it's basically going to be to give a border of 2 pixel solid, maybe dark blue, okay. And once we hover over one of these divs, so we will add this class of hovered. We'll just do it in a moment. Let me be done with CSS first. And what will happen is that background will change the background color to something lighter. Say for example, so that it's very obvious that we are trying to drop it there. And also we'll give it a border of 2 pixel dashed dark blue. Okay, so this is good.
All right.
Awesome. So for this fill, we will be starting the drag and we will be ending the drag, right? So we started a drag, we are ending the drag. So for this in JavaScript, we will be listening to these couple of events. So first thing, let's save the element in a variable called fill, okay. And then we will add event listeners to them. So fill dot add event listener. The first event that we would be listening to is drag start, and it's again, the way event listeners work. It will call back a function as soon as the drag start happens. Another event that we are interested in is dot add event listener. It's going to be drag end, and as soon as the drag end happens, this callback function would be invoked. Okay.
All right.
The first thing that we would like to do is we would like to, as soon as the drag start happens, we would like to add class list hold to that. Let's quickly check if it's really working, right? So what I'll do is I'll click and drag. So we can see that now we have this nice black border, right? Okay, we have this nice black border, and of course we would like to remove the black border once the drag end happens. So this dot class list dot remove, I think, hold, I guess. So as soon as I drag, I have this black thing, and as soon as I get rid of it, the black line is gone. Okay. Just like we added a couple of event listeners to this fill thing, right? Similarly, we need to add some of the drag and drop event listeners to these empties. Okay. So first I'll store these empties in a variable, and they would be document dot query selector empty. Now there are multiple empties, right? So we use query selectors, okay, and we have a node list of elements. Okay, now we can loop over empties. For example, we can use a for of loop for empty of empties, and here for each one, okay, we can add a couple of event listener. So empty dot add event listener will listen to a particular event, then invoke a particular function. Okay, so we will be listening to a couple of events. For example, we would be listening to first thing that we would be listening to is drag over. Then we would be listening to drag enter, then drag leave, and finally drop. These events are pretty much, self-explanatory. So whenever I drag something, I drag it. Now it's running over one of the empties, right? It's running over one of the empties. So that is running over. Then we are entering in another one. We are entering in another one and then running over. And finally, we can leave. We are entering, leaving, and finally we can drop it at some point in time. Okay. As we code it, things will make much more sense to us. With drag enter and drag leave, one obvious thing I would like to do is I would like to add this class of hovered, and on drag leave I would like to remove this class of hovered. Okay. Let's see how it looks like. It doesn't seem to be working. Let me see. Hovered. Let me just inspect it. And I'll place it down. Open the console, and here what I would like to do is on drag enter I want to log drag enter. Here I would like to log drag leave. Okay. And yeah, it somehow doesn't seem to be firing. Let me prevent the default and then see. If things work. Okay, so it does not seem to be working for me. So I'm just debugging it. I don't want to pause and debug it. I want to debug it in front of you because we have done something wrong, right? So first thing, let's check that are we targeting the correct class? Okay, so we have empty here, so this looks correct to me. And let me also log empties. And why aren't we getting a list of empties? We should be having a list of empties here, right? So const empty is equals to document.query selectors empty. So we should be getting this log, right? Okay. So this is wrong. Query selector all. It's query selector all. Okay. And now, oh yeah. So that was the problem. Instead of query selector all, what I did was query selectors. Okay. This happens during live coding. Once you will get into some live coding, you will experience it as well. So here you can see that I can drag things. And as I enter one of the cells, it is very much visible that, I am trying to drag it, drop it there, right? So the last thing that I need to handle is drop. Okay. And it's very simple. Basically in the empty, we will append fill. Pretty much it. So if I drag this here, so I have appended the fill. Another thing I need to do is to get rid of this hovered thing, right? So I need to remove the hovered. So here it is. Nice, right? Another cool thing you can do here is that whenever, and I'll leave it to you, whenever I'm starting to drag, add a class to the parent as well and make the whole thing a bit, transparent. Awesome, right? So quickly revising it, recapping it. For something that is draggable, all we need to do at the HTML level is add draggable attribute to be true. This is one thing we need to do. And then we need to listen to a couple of events. A couple of events in the box level, at the box level, and the thing that has to be filled. So at both the levels, we have to listen to a couple of events. Style is some basic style to give some visual indications. So here, for the fill, that is this golden yellow box, we are listening to drag start and drag end. And all we are doing is we are adding a CSS class so that, we can give it a little bit of, visual clue. It's not necessary, friends. Feel free to get rid of it. It's just to give a nice visual clue to the users. And then we are listening to events in each of these boxes. So whenever the drag over is happening, whenever the drag enter is happening, whenever drag leave is happening, and whenever the drop is happening. Pretty simple. And here we already had this, this particular element inside fill. So all we needed was to just append this fill to the place where we are dropping it. As simple as that. Okay, let's go through the documentation real quick. I think now the documentation would make a little bit more sense to you. So basically, there, we did it in, with considering separation of concerns, right? All of our script is here, right? We are selecting fill and then adding listeners. Another way of doing this and less recommended way of doing this is to, handle it here itself inside HTML. So here what they are doing is they are listening to the drop event directly inside HTML by using onDrop attribute. And here they are passing in this callback function, this drop function. Okay, exactly same thing. And again, in the drop, they are appending the child, and on drag over, they are calling the allow drop. So this is equivalent to, I think, this particular callback function that we have written. And yeah, they are handling on drag start. So things like everything that we have seen in a much cleaner way. So yeah, I think more than these, this is the way you will be writing code more often. So yeah, I'll highly encourage that you do this practice, just trying to recreate it all by yourself. Okay, don't worry too much about visual styles, but the functionality wise, as long as it's working, we are good. Then on drag over, event specifies where the drag data can be dropped. By default, data elements cannot be dropped into other elements. To allow drop, we must prevent default handling of the element, and this is done by prevent default. So why do we need drag over, right? Because we are not doing anything. We're not adding or removing any class anywhere. By default, HTML does not allow you to drop anything anywhere, right? And so drag over event will happen whenever you drag anything over any element. Okay. But HTML by default won't allow you to drop. So what this prevent default does is it allows you to drop. That's it. Now do the drop. Again, we have seen that. Right. So yeah, feel free to go through the examples. I think we have covered it pretty nicely. Web storage. Again, there are two types of storage, local storage and session storage. In most of the interviews, these are asked, and these are asked for a very good reason, that these are very popular things that you will be using when you are developing a real world project. Again, this is more of JavaScriptish thing, but still, it's good to know them and it's not hard. So what local storage does is it stores data with no expiration date. And what session store does is it stores data for one session. So data is lost when the browser tab is closed. Only till the browser tab is open, you are able to access session storage. And local storage, it's there. Again, local storage is really simple. All you need to do is local storage.setItem and local storage dot get item. I'll quickly demo it to you, then it will make a little bit more sense. I'll just move this to another window. So anywhere in the console, if you type local storage, okay, so you have this local storage object, okay, and this local storage object has two very important methods. One is get item, another is set item. As simple as that. Where do you check local storage values? You go to memory, not memory, application, then local storage, and then this is the local. So you can see there are no stored values here. Okay, I'll again go back to console, and what I'll do now is local storage dot set item, okay, and I'll set something called username of local, something silly just for test, and I'll name it John, okay, and let me press enter. Now if I go to application, you see that I have this value here, right, in the local storage, and any tab from anywhere, you know, as long as it's local storage, they can access this. Okay, so even if I open this in a brand new tab, okay, a brand new tab, or maybe browser window, if I do inspect, if I go to console, I just copy this so that I don't make a mistake, spelling mistake. So now if I do local storage dot get item, you will immediately get back John. Okay, and you can also set it again, reset it again. So it's like key value pairs stored inside of browser, which you can use, your website can use from any tab. Okay, let's go back to the W3 documentation. Yeah, so try out this example. Okay, the concept is very much the same. We are using get item and set item methods of the local storage. Okay, the name value pairs are always stored as strings. Okay, so remember to convert them to strings format whenever needed. Okay, and so they have given another example of how many times, you know, the user has clicked a button. So feel free to play around with this. This is the way you get comfortable with an API. The more you work with them, the better you get. Then session storage. So we just looked at local storage, and now it's the session storage. So session storage object is equal to the local storage, except that it stores data only for one session. So as soon as you close the browser tab that is saving a session storage, data in session storage, the data will be gone. Okay, and data is deleted when user closes the specific browser tab. So it's written here, right? So following example again counts the number of times user has clicked a button. So you see this, instead of local storage we have session storage, and so basically, you know, it has a slightly different API. So session storage dot click count, anything, you know, it can be anything. We are adding basically and we are retrieving them. Really simple thing. Please play around with it to get more and more comfortable. About web workers. What are web workers? Okay, so let's see. I don't think it's written very well here, but yeah, let's go through the documentation. Then, if required, I'll add some more information on top of what they have provided. So, a web worker is a JavaScript running in background without affecting the performance of a page. So, for example, you have a very expensive calculation, right? And you don't want it to block things. Okay, so what usually you do is you give it to a web worker. In the background, it processes the information and gives your program back. Okay, so in that way, it does not affect the performance of the page. Okay, so let's read out so that it's very clear to all of us. When executing scripts in an HTML page, the page becomes unresponsive until the script is finished. And a web worker is a JavaScript that runs in the background, independent of other scripts, without affecting the performance of the page. Okay, so why web worker? This is why web worker. You can continue to do whatever you want, like clicking, selecting things, while the web workers runs in the background. Now they have given a couple of web worker example, so I'll just try it out. So you can see that I think instead of this example, maybe I'll write out an example for you that will make a little bit more sense to you. Okay, so here, let me get rid of all of these. Let me get rid of all of these. Okay. So now what I'll do is I'll create two buttons. Okay. So button ID is equal to button 1, task 1. Okay. BTN button for task 1. Okay. And this is like do task 1. I'm just thinking out, okay, but hopefully it will be much more clearer than the example in the W3 schools. And then now there is button with an ID of maybe like let's do one task only. Okay, button do task. Button do task. Okay, save it. And I have a button called do task. Now, inside the script, I will listen to the event of click. So let button do task is equal to document dot get element by ID thing, and then we will listen to the click event. So button do task dot add event listener will be listening to the click event, and on click this particular function will be invoked. Okay, and what this function will do is it will call this function do task. Okay, so we will be invoking do task. I hope it's clear to you so far. What's happening is we have a button called button do task, and on click of that button this particular function is invoked. As simple as that. Now let's say this function is very you know, memory intensive thing, like a very big for loop, a lot of things happening, right? And this is causing some bottleneck, performance bottleneck to our application. So for example, just I'll write down something to mimic, you know, a slow function. It actually won't be slow because it's an asynchronous function. I'll use set timeout. So set timeout takes in a function and it takes in a time. So for example, in 2 seconds, it will simply log out task done. Okay. Or maybe in 3 seconds, it will simply log out task done. Let me see how it works. Okay. So here, if I refresh it, my God, why am I getting these? And I click on do task. So 1, 2, 3. In 3 seconds, I get this task done. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want that JavaScript is a single threaded application, right? So this big task, I want to, you know, create a worker and give it to it, you know, do this for me. And once the task is done, just, you know, give back the result to me. Okay. So how do we do that using the web worker? So the first thing that we would do is we will create a separate JavaScript file. So maybe a new file like worker.js. Okay. Now this is supposed to be our web worker. Okay. So there are two important events. One is inside of web worker. One is on message. Another is post message. Okay. So whenever, and we will be sending messages from our main thread or script.js to web worker. Don't worry about that. So just assume that we received a message on message and we want to handle it. So on message is going to be a function. Okay. And we will get access to a lot of things here. So for example, you know, do this, do that, you know, we can get them from event. Okay. And then we will actually move this, you know, which is not a very big thing, but let's assume this is a very big thing. So we will simply cut it and move it to the worker. So we are basically, you know, whenever the worker will be receiving a sort of message, it will be doing this very important task. And after 3 seconds, you know, it can either console log, but what I would like to do is after 3 seconds, I want it to, or maybe, you know, after a loop or whatever, you know, I want it to post a message back to me that task is done. Okay, keeping things really simple. So 2 things to remember. One is on message, another is post message. So inside script, now we have to again, you know, do the same thing. So what we'll do is we will get hold of our worker. So new worker, and it's going to be, because it's at the same level as index, right? I don't want to keep it inside images. I want to keep it outside. Okay. So at the same level as index. So here I'll type its path worker.js. Okay. Now again, you know, we do 2 things. We post a message. So for example, my worker dot post message. Here we can give anything like, you know, Okay, but since we already only have one task, so we are not actually checking it here. So on message, so whenever we post message from here main thread, this on message will be executed in the worker thread. Okay, think of it as threads because it gives a very similar performance and other benefits. And as soon as the task is done, okay, as soon as the task is done, we can we can listen to it. So my worker dot on message, and it's going to be a callback function. And here we can simply alert, maybe we can alert e dot data. Okay, and now let me just save it and try to execute it. So let's see if it's working, and then I'll explain the entire thing to you. So I click on do task 1 2 3 4, and in 3 seconds I get the alert that task is done. Task is done. Now let me explain you entire thing that's happening. So on click of the button, we were supposed to do some task, but that task just assumed that it was a very resource intensive task. So instead of doing it here in the main or script.js or the main thread, what I did is I created a worker by using this constructor function worker, passing it in a file, a path to a file, and I posted it a message do task. It did task and sent it back to me, posted it back to me. I listened to that event and I got what I needed from e.data, and I alerted that. In the worker, it's almost the same thing. When I receive a message, this function is executed, and when our task completes, we post a message back to the main thread. So most important part here is the concept of listening, right? So a lot of event listeners happening. So we are posting message and we are receiving message, on message and post message. Same thing here in worker, on message and post message. As simple as that. So I think these all will make a lot more sense to you once you watch this particular explanation that I have given, because here this demo worker.js is a separate JavaScript file. If you are logged in, you may try it and download the file and try it yourself. Okay. Next, it's HTML server sent events or one-way messaging. Again, this is too much dependent on the backend thing. So don't worry about this. Basically, there are a couple of events that you need to listen, but we won't go into this. Feel free to go through it, but I don't find this super important. Then there are a couple of HTML examples, which I will definitely want you to go through all by yourself. Then there is a quiz. Please go through the quiz. There are some exercises. Okay. Start with a couple of exercises. Don't worry about this certificate. Okay. I'll give you another way to get a free certificate today itself. And then quickly go through the summary. Okay. And go through accessibility really well. Really nicely go through the accessibility, and also do a little bit of Googling around what is web accessibility. And there is a master class for Skill Edge on accessibility. Very important. Okay. So just search for Skill Edge official accessibility. Okay. And if you go to videos, let me go to YouTube. Then I'll go to Skill Edge official. Skill Edge official. And here I will search in the videos for accessibility. Accessibility. So you have these two great, we have these two great resources to master web accessibility. Okay, so please go through them whenever you get time. These are really important. Okay, mastering web accessibility. We don't have many very good resources online, so I created these master classes. Feel free to go through them and master these. For certification thing, don't worry about these W3 School certification maybe. A better way would be to go through Free Code Camp. Okay, and Free Code Camp has a couple of free certifications. Okay, really nice certifications. So you can definitely go for responsive web design. Okay, then yeah, pretty much responsive web design. Responsive web design would be really nice to have. Right? Go through this certification. It will be a very good revision of whatever you have learned so far. Okay.